Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic is how to minister specifically to cancer patients. My guest is Reverend Percy McCray, who is a minister and who has been doing cancer ministry for over 20 years. Reverend McCray, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you as well. Thank you for having me, Lori.
It was really interesting to me how you first became involved in cancer ministry, and it was when you were sort of a hospital chaplain and were ministering to a patient there, and they said, hey, you know, I don't get this kind of attention and this kind of ministry even at my home church. And then the light bulb went off. Hey, churches need to have cancer ministries. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a real aha moment. Talk about the Holy Spirit kind of speaking to you. And that's exactly what happened. And from that interaction, I was asked by that particular patient, would I be willing to sit down and speak with her local pastor and his consortium of pastors that he belonged to in his community. And so we did that. And from that engagement, it became very clear, and it was crystallized in my heart, that the local church, not because of desire, but because of lack of information and training, really needed to have someone that would provide them kind of leadership instruction around cancer care leadership and ministry to cancer patients from a healthcare perspective. And so we started out and launched that ministry several years ago. We have over 3,000 churches internationally now that we have trained free of charge with the Our Journey of Hope Cancer Care Leadership program, where we literally train local churches and leaders on how to start cancer care ministries inside of their faith community, and it's all free of charge.
This is a specific ministry that you encourage churches to develop that specifically targets and meets the special needs of cancer patients within that congregation. Are there a lot of cancer patients in a typical congregation?
Absolutely. According to the American Cancer Society and other cancer organizations, the last set of statistics that I've heard, roughly about 39% of Americans will be estimated to be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetime. And that's about 1 in 3 people. If you just take the average congregation and count every third person, that would give you an idea of potentially how many people may be sitting inside of a local church that either has cancer or will be projected at some point to have cancer. And so we need to be aware of those numbers as they continue to increase with regard to the possibility of cancer diagnosis.
So a lot of church leaders might be thinking, I'm not really sure why we would even need a cancer ministry. I mean, okay, a lot of people in our congregation have cancer, but hey, they're being treated by their doctors. So what's the purpose of a cancer ministry? What needs do cancer patients in our church have that aren't being met?
Well, there are many needs, quite frankly. And I remember when I first introduced this to several churches, I was getting that type of rebuttal. Yes, churches typically pray for their members. They'll go visit them at the hospital and they'll take them a casserole. But there are so many other mental and emotional needs of the cancer patient that need to be addressed by their faith leaders or their faith community that they struggle with. For example, anger. Some people are angry with God for being diagnosed or may feel like that they're being punished by God. And so cancer is a result of maybe sin in their life. Well, they need to have someone to help unpack all of those types of mental and emotional dynamics. Fear. Cancer patients are fearful. Yes, even people of faith can deal with the dynamic of fear. You know, I myself am a now 3-year cancer survivor. Thank God I am doing well. I have no evidence of disease, but I was diagnosed with early stage colon cancer. And when you hear that word that you have cancer, there is something that washes over you that if you're not grounded and if you're not really supported in your faith, that you can really begin to start going into different directions, sideways, emotionally and mentally, with regard to what do I do now? How do I work through this? And being paralyzed by some of those emotions. The local church and the faith community, according to Matthew 25, needs to step in as a mandate and attend to the needs of the sick.
There definitely needs to be some training involved before you start talking to cancer patients, because you could accidentally say the wrong thing. So talk about the training that people can receive before they actually start interacting one-on-one with cancer patients in their churches.
And you are exactly correct. This is the type of ministry that requires insight and understanding. It should not just be entered into haphazardly. And so there are some things to be made aware of. And so training really begins to cover all of the different aspects of the mental, emotional, and psychological and spiritual challenges of individuals. For example, we also provide training around caring for the caregiver. They also have their own issues as well. But with that, knowing what to say and when to say it, understanding what this disease is, many people only have tidbits of information that they may have heard from individuals here and there. And in some cases, they may have erroneous information about cancer. Well, you can't address an enemy that you do not know or understand. So we provide a layman's insight to what is cancer, how does cancer work, and then, of course, all of the options of things that now can be available to be done, just to give people insight to the possibilities of modalities that are available to them, or effective hospital visits. A lot of people may think that they're doing a good job when they go visit people, but they're violating a lot of different rules. Over my 2 decades of supporting cancer patients inside of a clinical environment, we have built into this training curriculum that people won't make those mistakes because no one told them or taught them better. They will be better equipped to be able to go in and sit down and begin to develop a relationship with cancer patients as well as their caregivers and be effective in the ministry to them.
This is such a great tool. So if a church wants to start a cancer care ministry, they choose 2 people, 2 leaders who actually take the training that you provide free of charge. That's wonderful. And then those 2 people go back to their home congregation and teach everyone else who wants to actually become a minister. Is that right?
That's correct. And now that we're virtually doing the trainings, we're still in the era of COVID where we now are doing trainings virtually on Zoom. You actually can have more than 1 or 2 people from your local church that can join the training sessions. And so you receive that information, you get the curriculum, we download all of that information to you, again, free of charge. And then individuals who graduate from the 2-day session, they go back to their local congregation and they begin first and foremost to make sure that they have created a vision that the pastor will recommend and speak about and share with the congregation. And then they can begin the recruitment process of individuals who may be interested in wanting to be part of a cancer care ministry. You can be former cancer patients, people who may already be working in the medical field, doctors and et cetera, or individuals who just care about God's people may want to be involved in a cancer care ministry. And then we have outlined a training process for those inside of that local church to be indoctrinated and oriented around, with a training manual that we will provide to those who graduate from our training sessions at Our Journey of Hope.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but before we go to the commercial, we want to get that. Once again, the name is Our Journey of Hope. How can people get information about how they can be trained and become a part of this?
Go to ourjourneyofhope.com. That's our website, ourjourneyofhope.com, all one word. And that will take you directly to our website where you can register for a free online training session. And it'll give you some basic information that how you can begin to start this journey into cancer care leadership training. Ourjourneyofhope.com.
All right, we're going to briefly pause and be right back with Reverend Percy McCray talking about cancer care ministries. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living, and we're continuing our discussion with Reverend Percy McCray, who is one of the leaders of Our Journey of Hope, which is the organization that teaches various churches how to develop cancer ministries at their home congregations. And you were talking about so many really interesting things that are involved in the training. I found particularly interesting what to say and what not to say to people who have been diagnosed with cancer. I was noticing in some of your literature, you said one of the things to say or to avoid saying is, I know someone who had that and they died. Can you kind of elaborate on some of the ways that some of the language that we need to use when we are dealing and talking to people who are going through cancer treatment?
Absolutely. It's imperative that we be sensitive and cognizant to the fact that cancer patients are very sensitive, obviously. because they've been given a diagnosis of a very deadly disease that historically has not had a great reputation when people are told that. Of course, we now live in a day and age where people are living much longer with a diagnosis of cancer than any time before, and that's the good news. But we need to be mindful of, first and foremost, sharing horror stories of previous cancer patients' experiences that we knew. First and foremost, that may not necessarily be this particular cancer patient's experience at all. So we shouldn't share stories that happen to other individuals. Every cancer journey is unique, it's individual, and we need to allow the spirit of hope to be part of that person's unique entrance into this discussion. So we need to be careful not to share horror stories of the past. We need to also be mindful of telling cancer patients, I know how you feel. Unless you have walked a journey of cancer, and unless you have been in that scenario, you really don't know how they feel. And that can become a bit disconcerting for a cancer patient to hear someone say, I think I know how you feel, when really you don't. So again, one of the key elements in communication with cancer patients is allow the patient to drive the bus. And that euphemism basically means allow them to dictate the terms of the conversation. You can start by saying, how are you feeling? Or how are you doing? And allow them to kind of give you some things to feed off of, but do not enter into a conversation with a cancer patient with a pre-inscribed script. You're going to have to kind of allow them to set the stage and the terms of the discussion.
Well, it sounds like you do a lot of listening and be that listening, compassionate ear. And also, I've noticed you say, try to stay away from advising people, you need to take your vitamin D, or, you need to do the giving people advice, whether it's medical or even nutritional.
Exactly. We need to be careful because some people are already overwhelmed and they're inundated with information of things that they're being told that they must do, or they can't do, or they should do. And so we need to be conscious of the fact of not coming across as someone that's just kind of piling on with more information of things of what they should do. Again, we are there to support them, nurture them, and encourage them, but we don't want to overload their bandwidth with more of the same information that their doctor has said, that their nurse has said, that their oncologist has said. You're there to actually try to add some levity and to buoy them and lift them up. So we need to be very conscious and aware of not sounding like their medical team, because again, they have tons of that information that is being thrown at them, and they're actually a little overwhelmed and can get overburdened by hearing that ongoing information.
I have a dear friend who is a Christian, and a lot of her Christian brothers and sisters were trying to help her when she was going through cancer. Thank the Lord, she's been cancer-free for a number of years. But she said when she was doing that, one of the most hurtful things and burdensome things that she heard from her Christian brothers and sisters was people second guessing her treatment, saying, oh, you're doing chemo, you shouldn't do that, or oh, you're getting this kind of a drug, you shouldn't do that. I've heard bad things and I saw on the news such and such about. And she's like, I already decided that I was doing that treatment, and them saying that really was very, very difficult. So can you address those types of things about talking about their treatment?
Oh, absolutely. At the end of the day, it falls into the general category of basically do not judge a cancer patient. Do not judge them about their medical treatment. Do not judge them about their quote unquote spiritual state of being. Again, cancer patients are fighting a mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical battle. And the last thing that they need is to have a dear friend come along and badger them or judge them or critique what they are or are not doing in that context. I remember the story of Job, where his friends came by to encourage him. And basically at the end of the conversation, Job left discouraged because of his friends, and basically had to kind of support himself. And we don't want to be that type of, and people mean well, they have good intentions, but at the end of the day, we must respect and allow the cancer patient to make their own choices and respect their decisions, and support them in that and not judge them, because it becomes counterintuitive to them mentally and emotionally. And it can have a negative impact upon them because they feel weighed and burdened down by the fact that their friends or their family members are not in lockstep with them. And they therefore then feel lonely and isolated.
Such great information. We're going to take another quick break and be right back with Reverend Percy McCray talking about how to minister to cancer patients. Stay with us. Let's continue our discussion with Reverend Percy McCray about how to minister to cancer patients. We talked a lot in the last segment about what not to do. Let's talk about what we do say and how the words that come out of our mouth that can be uplifting and encouraging when people are questioning their faith, for example. How could a loving God let this happen to me? What do you say in a situation like that?
Yeah, I've been in that situation many, many times, and that's a tough place to be. There's no question about it. But the first thing that I will say to people is do not make up anything and do not create some off-brand theology to kind of let yourself off the hook. At the end of the day, we simply need to be mindful of the fact that we need to choose our words wisely of what we say and how we say it to a cancer patient. Here are some things that we should remember that we can use at all times. Ask open-ended questions of the cancer patient. How are you feeling today? How do you feel about your treatment? How are things going for you? And allow them to give you information. But what happens for us, particularly as believers, we think that we are supposed to have ready-made conversation and statements, almost a sermon, if you will, that we come in and we have all of this information that we want to give and all of this verbiage that we want to say to an individual. And that's just the wrong thing to do because we don't know the situation, the tone or the temperament of the patient or the circumstances of their day at that moment. We've got to find out what's going on with them, how are things, but we cannot judge them and we cannot take the position of, well, obviously, maybe you sinned in your life or you did something to bring this upon you. We can't go down that road. And theologically, we don't have enough insight to understand that. John 9:1-4 tells us a great story of a young man that was born blind from birth. And the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned here? And Jesus said, no one sinned. He said that this was done in order for the works of God to be glorified. And so we need to step back and step away from trying to answer or give a reason for why something has or has not happened to an individual. We simply do not have enough insight to be able to make that determination and then to associate it with sin or something that you have done or an individual has done is premature and in many cases may very well be inaccurate. We need to support people with the idea of the fact that God is faithful, that God loves them, and that God cares for them, and that he is not judging them at the end of the day. And so we need to encourage them around the Psalms, Proverbs, all of those scriptures that talks about that, lo, I am with you even unto the ends of the earth. I will be with you. I will walk with you. I will uphold you with my right hand. But that God is not judging them is a very important school of thought that we need to stay away from and not allow the cancer patient to dwell upon.
Wise words. Great advice. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Reverend Percy McCray. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. Let's get back to our discussion with Reverend Percy McCray about how to minister to cancer patients. We've talked a lot about things to say, things not to say. And you did mention making casseroles, but there are a lot of physical things that we can do to minister to people who are going through cancer treatment, besides bringing them food. Like when people are going through chemo, for example, they're very tired and they may need help with things like housework, driving the kids, grocery shopping, things like that.
Absolutely. And so this is called attending to the practical needs of cancer patients. I've actually written a free resource that outlines some of this information, and you can get that on my other website called Health, Hope, and Inspiration.com, which is a podcast that I executive produce and host. And we actually interview cancer patients and their caregivers to talk about these types of subjects. But one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that cancer patients have practical needs, but they may not be feeling well. They may not be physically able to attend to those practical needs. Think about all of the things that any of us do on any given day as just a normal routine, picking up our children, going to the grocery store, taking care of our lawn, laundry. The same thing is true for cancer patients. So we need to make ourselves available to them and offer to pick up some of those duties or chores, if you will, to help them out and to eliminate or alleviate the burden of them having to kind of go through all of their treatment, try to rest, and then still try to maintain the day-to-day activities that are necessary. So practical needs, think of the things that you do every day that you need to do. That is also true for the cancer patient and or their caregiver. Offer to help take care of those needs. Go cut the grass for them. Yeah, go offer to go grocery shopping or pick up the kids from school if you have a relationship. Anything that'll help to eliminate the burden of time that they may not have a lot of, or the fact that they don't feel very well, that they're able to incorporate into their day. We as believers and fellow saints, we can help support them in those ways with practical aspects of their day-to-day life.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. There's so much more we could talk about. Reverend Mcrae, you have an award-winning podcast. Tell our viewers how they can find out more about what you're doing and our journey of hope.
Yeah, we have about 300,000 current subscribers to Health, Hope, and Inspiration. And it is a podcast where we interview patients, cancer patients, their caregivers, doctors, clinicians, nutritionists, anyone that can speak to the cancer conversation from a faith perspective, as well as good clinical medical care. You can go to healthhopeandinspiration.com. I have over 50 free resources, digital resources that you can download, that you can share with family and friends, that talks about finances, children whose parents have cancer, dealing with fear, any number of topics that are available on this topic, available free of charge. Healthhopeandinspiration.com. Tune in, subscribe, and share to everyone that you know who may be dealing with cancer and who are people of faith.
Reverend Mcrae, it was great to see you. Thank you so much for being on our program today. And also thank you so much for the work you're doing and have been doing for decades. You're such a blessing to so many people.
Thank you, my dearest. The pleasure is all mine. Talk to you soon.
All right, I hope so. And thanks to you for joining us for this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week. Bye now.